In other news today, political parties and individuals wanting to contest the local elections have until Monday to pay their electoral deposits. The Electoral Commission says a failure to do so means they won't be on the ballot paper.
The other issue that we just need to be categorical about is that the prescribed deposits have to be paid on Monday the 23rd or by Monday the 23rd. There is no opportunity to correct that non-compliance. So parties, independent candidates, everybody intending to contest must have paid their election deposits by Monday. There is no opportunity to correct that non-compliance. They are not intended to be a bar to people participating. They just are intended to ensure that there is no frivolity in the electoral contest. And should the electoral contestants, be they parties or independent candidates, get at least a seat or 10% of the vote, the money is returned to them. So these are not fees.
The IEC also says the deadline date could move if the elections are postponed.
This cut-off date is related to an election on the 27th of October. In the event we are successful with the relief we seek in the Constitutional Court, then a new timetable has to be discussed with political parties and agreed. And there'll be a new deadline for a cut-off date for candidate nomination in respect of the new changed situation. So there will be an opportunity only if we are successful with our court application.
Well, that Constitutional Court application, of course, due on Friday. Vaccine hesitancy could be a major factor in the local elections, especially if we aren't able to vaccinate voters against COVID-19 in time. Mbali Thethani is not, as far as I know, registering to be a candidate in the local elections, rather. She is our political reporter. Mbali, good afternoon to you, unless something's changed in the last few minutes. So we know that the National Coronavirus Command Council met yesterday. The Health Minister, Joe Phaahla, if I've understood it correctly, Dr. Phaahla believes we should change the age at which you can get a vaccine to 19. What's Cabinet discussing?
Well, of course, Stephen, that's top of the agenda at the moment, and because we know that over the past couple of days and weeks, we have seen that there is this reluctancy for a lot of people to get vaccinated. We've seen empty vaccine sites, and the problem here in South Africa, we know that before we had a problem of getting vaccines, but this time around, it's actually getting people vaccinated. And I spoke to a number of those vaccinologists and those medical experts, and they are saying that, well, government is not doing enough to get the vaccines to the people. Here you are, you have to decide whether, to buy a loaf of bread or to take a taxi and go to a vaccine site, and some are even saying that, well, maybe it needs the vigor that it did with the HIV and AIDS campaign. So here you are, Stephen, and as you said that we are also heading to those local government elections, and that matter is going to be heard on Friday at the Constitutional Court. And we know that, the former Deputy Chief Justice, Dikgang Moseneke, heavily relied on the evidence from the medical fraternity. So if you're not getting people vaccinated, what does this mean for our country when we're heading to the polls? And if we do indeed head to the polls, what will this mean for super spreader events like elections?
It's a really complex position because the Constitutional Court has to give some weight to the medical evidence, but it has to be guided by the Constitution, which has, as far as I've read it, and I've read this provision a couple of times, I'm not a lawyer, of course, which I'm sure you're allowed to remind me, doesn't have any way to allow an extension. So it's a difficult choice, and yet the medical experts weighed very heavily on the former Deputy Chief Justice.
Exactly, and that's what Justice Moseneke said. He was saying that we need to save more lives. And even much earlier on, Stephen, I did speak to Professor Amadi, talking about this issue, that if you're seeing this trend from those who are 35 years and older, who are refusing to go and get vaccinated, we should begin to open this up to even those who are younger. So it's those who are around the age of the teenagers and even older than that. So those are the ones right now that government should even be considering to focus on, because we don't know, Stephen, the trajectory of COVID-19. And at the same time, the government has a task of whether they should go ahead and have these local government elections. And of course, even looking at that evidence, Stephen, it's really been a problem right now for government, and asking the Constitutional Court, essentially, the IEC here, asking the Constitutional Court not to abide by the Constitution to have those elections. And we have seen that we won't reach herd immunity before the end of the year. And that advice from the medical fraternity saying that, well, the only time where South Africa can have local government elections would be next year in February. So over the past couple of days, or the next few days, Stephen, it will be a very tricky one for government to maneuver around. But those experts that we have spoken to, they are saying that government should prioritize those who are 60 years and older. They need to get vaccinated, and especially those with comorbidities. But at the same time, if there are vaccines available, because we have seen, we've even had more supply of those vaccines, if they are sitting in a warehouse, with an expiration date, you should get more people vaccinated.
There are all sorts of moving parts to this thing. I mean, you've got the vaccination on the one side, the biggest national effort that we've tried to do. It's unique in our living memory. I understand, I think in the 1950s there was an effort, might have been the 1950s, to vaccinate adults against polio, but that was that's the last time this happened. So we have that on the one side. We have local elections on the other side. And then there's another moving part within political parties. They have to choose their candidates. Now, particularly for parties in government, so primarily the ANC, this is also difficult, and they're also now on a time restriction. The clock is ticking for them.
And you're absolutely right. You have political parties, they need to select their candidates, but at the same time you have those political parties who have been asking for these elections to be postponed, saying that we have not been able to campaign properly. We have not even been able to hold election meetings, because you would know that because of COVID-19, those meetings are restricted to at least 50 people indoors. And you've also heard the likes of the EFF saying that, well, we cannot meet in a hall and select our candidates if we are still under lockdown regulations. So while there is an issue around getting people vaccinated, there's still an issue around those lockdown regulations, and at the same time, Stephen, those local government elections.
And just to clarify, Mbali Thethani, you're available only as a candidate for the Newzroom Afrika political party in the local elections.
Well, Stephen, I'll stick to my day job.
Mbali Thethani, thanks very much indeed. She'll be with us through it, whether they're in October or in February.